first thing to do really is to just acknowledge some of my collaborators. So Claire has already mentioned Eleanor Longden, who's been a really long-standing ally and collaborator, developing some of these ideas, drawing on her wisdom of lived experience to really think about what is a supportive and compassionate way of relating to voices, and how can we use some of this and combined with some of the science and understanding about our brains and how our social interactions support different processes in our brains, to really understand how to go about a more peaceful, caring relationship with ourselves and our voices. So that's Eleanor. Also on the clinical side of things, in terms of the people who have been helping me develop the therapy, the approach to interventions, also mention Chris Irons and Paul Gilbert here. So these are some wonderful colleagues here in the UK. Paul Gilbert's obviously the founder of Compassion Focused Therapy, and I've been really fortunate to have his input into this whole program of therapy and research and innovation, really. So Paul has been actually, I was really lucky to have him as a clinical supervisor while I was sort of muddling my way through trying to do this work with NHS clients with psychosis. So Paul used to listen to all my recordings of therapy sessions, and which is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I don't know if any of you have had your therapy sessions, those of you who are therapists, recorded, but to have Paul every week tearing these to shreds is a bit tricky, but a huge and important learning experience for me about how to really understand CFT and apply it to voice hearers. Also on the research side of things, Emmanuel Peters, Till Wykes and Andrew Gumley, these are all big shot professors in the UK, King's College London and University of Glasgow. And these have been really important colleagues as well to help make sure that when we're researching this, we're trying to do it in a way that's rigorous and something that hopefully will have traction as well when we're trying to disseminate these ideas in the academic world. So just to credit and acknowledge those colleagues as well. I did put my email address on the slide as well. You know, I really would like to hear from you as well. I mean, I'm sure a lot of what we can talk about we've got time today to do some Q&A, but you can get hold of me as well if there's anything else you'd like to follow up on, or any, you know, things you're interested in to look into further training. I'm actually doing some training quite soon in the US. And so this might be something that we can put a link on the chat as well. It's actually for Stanford University. I'm going to be out there in the summer in July. So I'll be doing a 4 half-day workshop. So if anyone is interested in really deepening their skills in CFT for psychosis, that might be something to look out for as well. Okay, so I'm going to start off this webinar in a way that I don't usually start things off, which is talking about some research findings. And you're all probably thinking, oh no, don't all leave. So I'm going to start with some research findings. And the reason I'm doing that is because I've learned a lot about this from the people that I've worked with in applying these ideas with people with lived experience, people who have had maybe a diagnosis of schizophrenia or some other psychosis related diagnosis. For a lot of the clients who came into my research study had been service users for maybe 10 years or 15 years. So I do want to share some initial findings. This is just some data from some of the initial pilot work that we've been doing, looking at CFT for psychosis. And I think it's really interesting. And I think there's a lot to hold in mind as we go through this webinar. First of all, these are graphs which show individual cases in terms of distress So it's measuring distress in relation to their voices in the top graphs, and distress in relation to their delusions in the second half, the lower half of the screen. And this is the kind of how distress scores change for each people as they engage with compassion focused therapy. So the CFT therapy was a 6 to 8 month therapy, meeting every week, so about 26 weeks of therapy. But the grey one here is the distress before therapy started, and then that's the start of therapy, midway through, end of therapy, and then the second grey one is follow-up. So follow-up, this is after therapy's finished. So what's quite interesting is that there is a little bit of a pattern. Well, there's a few patterns. So I'm pleased to say that for every single person in this study, distress ends up in a lower place than where it started. So that's kind of handy. So I guess just taking that in and of itself, that's probably a good thing. People are less distressed at the end of therapy. But how they get there is kind of interesting. For a lot of people, distress actually goes up first before it comes down. So this is the mid-therapy point. So 13 weeks into therapy, for some people, okay, this person did come down throughout, but this person went up and then down and then stayed down. This person didn't really change much and then came down at the end of therapy, and then that really came down post-therapy as well. Up and then down, up and then down. So this is really interesting. So distress in relation to voices, as you start doing CFT, distress might start going up. And let's just think about that for a minute, because compassion for voices, in fact, the definition of compassion is all about getting alongside our suffering. It's about moving closer towards our distress so that we can help. So much of the time we are trying to avoid distress and trying to push it away and shut it down and, medicate it away, perhaps. But actually, in CFT, we're trying to show up for our distress. And the definition of compassion that we use in CFT is a sensitivity to suffering of self and others with a motivation to try and help. So it's actually bringing us closer to suffering. And that doesn't sound great for a lot of people, but this is how healing happens. It's not just putting a plaster on things. It's not just kind of, avoiding, because actually a lot of the mental health problems that people have are as a result of constantly battling with their experiences, constantly trying to push them away and defeat them or be in conflict with them. So CFT does invite us to actually get closer to the things that are difficult. Maybe some of the trauma, Claire was mentioning trauma as a really important underlying process and cause for a lot of these experiences. And so we're really trying to actually get closer to some of these really painful and difficult experiences. This is my interpretation really, but what this is saying, that actually we need time. This is not something we can just do, overnight or, in a week. And it's not something that we expect to suddenly make a difference immediately. A CFT approach is really trying to get into some of the trauma and the distress, and that's difficult. So we might need time. The stress actually might go up before it comes down. But if we do give it enough time, so this is 26 weeks, and the stress does start coming down, and we do start finding a different way of relating to our experiences, certainly for the people who are coming into this study. Similar with distress in relation to delusions as well. So if you give it long enough, the stress does come down. This one's really going to give you a headache. So I'm not going to expect you to look at all of this. I'm just going to draw your attention to a couple of other things here. So this is when you put the whole group, the whole pilot group together. So all 7 people combined, and look at the mean scores now. So the last one was just single cases. This is the whole group mean. So first half of therapy, full therapy, and follow-up. So again, we were just really interested in looking at what changed quickly and what took longer to change. So voices, this is a measure of voices. Voices improve quickly in the first half of therapy. So this is first 13 sessions. That's a significant improvement in voices. And that's maintained for the full therapy and at follow-up. Delusions, however, first half of therapy, no change. But then there is change once you get through into the second half of therapy, once you look at the full therapy. So there's something here that maybe delusions take longer to improve through therapy than voices. And, you know, it's just, again, trying to make sense of these numbers. It might be that voice hearing experiences are more linked to states, you know, emotional states, whereas delusions might have all sorts of other layers of things associated that, you know, they might be linked to cognitions and beliefs. And I guess, you know, if you've got a belief that you are like a paranoid belief, for instance, that you are, you know, being under surveillance, or, you know, someone's tracking, you know, tapping your phones, or, you know, all sorts of things. I suppose you don't necessarily need to currently feel that someone's watching me right now, but you can still hold the belief that people are watching me generally in my life, and maybe they've just gone for tea or something, right? You know, so the belief doesn't have to be linked to a state, whereas voice hearing is perhaps more closely linked. So that's maybe why it changes a bit quicker.